yesterday, Soma and Kadara and I were working on some courses and some projects, and we were like, ideas were like just popping, and we were hitting off of one another and bouncing off of one another, and we like just completely tied ourselves up in knots around thinking. And it seemed like the more we thought and the more we planned and the more ideas we came up with, the more confounded we got, the more perplexed we got. And suddenly it just seemed like we were like just drowning in thoughts and drowning in opinions. And then all of a sudden, when we realized it, just the realization of we're running in circles, we're chasing our tail, we're coming up with our ideas, we're analyzing. I think it hit all of us at the same time, and then we just stopped. And when we stopped, it seemed like everything stopped. It stopped, it started moving like in a slow-mo. Well, that's how I experienced it. It was like slow-mo. Everything, we just started grinding to a halt, and we were just suspended. So the last thought ended, but the next thought did not arise. And we just sat in that space just trying to get ourselves together. We're like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Just trying to get out, just trying to wait for thoughts to come back is what we were doing, But in that space, there was that's the bliss that the Buddha Master talks about when the last thought has ended and the next thought has not arisen. And it's not a kind of nothingness, but the atmosphere is so pregnant with everything there, out of which something will come, and that will be the next thought. But suddenly we found ourselves suspended in a space where every thought was there. So the mind didn't have to go to anything because everything was right there. And based on our own wisdom, we can select the next thought. Based on our own state, we can enter into the next moment. And it wouldn't come. It wouldn't come for a while. We were like just captured in suspension. I like it when you can have an experience and like that's your experience because, all things are fabricated by the mind, right? Mind made, or we whatever we think and ponder on, that becomes the inclination of our mind. That will produce the next what? Thought. That will produce the next thought. So whatever your thought is, know that you produced it, and whether you produced it based on erroneous views or whether you produced it based on a low state of mind or a high state of mind, know that that's your own fabrication. So we think that it comes from out here, but the Dharma says that it's mind-produced, mind-made. That's why 2 people or 3 people or 5 people or 10 people can see something and they each comes up with their, not their impression, their fact of what they saw or what they heard, or what was experienced. But we have to know that for each one of us, it's in our own mind. And that's why the Buddha said you have to know your own mind. Now, I can come up, I can surmise something based on my impression of you, but that's not necessarily true. Actually, you could say that isn't true at all. That's just how I perceive it. I mean, I might be in the vicinity, I might be in the ballpark, but I can't say that that's the absolute truth of who you are or what you're doing, because that just comes up from my own mind. That is, unless you have a Buddhic mind, unless you have a perfected mind, then you can see and understand everything perfectly, not just what you see with your eye consciousness, but with your intrinsic Dharmakaya, Buddha nature. And the closer we get to that, the more useful we can be in the world, because we just don't muddy up the world with our erroneous views and our erroneous thoughts and our erroneous ideas. Now, that being said, so at the end of that, and we just suddenly sat, and all of our questions, if there were questions, were answered when the last thought ended and the next one did. Do I have the broken one? Sister, is that me up here? I'm not touching anything. Let me put it here so the cord is...
Hello, do you want to try this one?
I think so. I might be breaking these because I wrap them. Maybe I won't. I'll try not. Great. Sorry about that. Don't wrap these, you break something. And then we finished up our meeting in, I don't know, like about 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, but we had already spent 2 hours, just trying to use our own intelligence and our own wisdom and, even our own desire for something to come out right, And so that's what that means when the last thought has ended and the next thought has not arisen. There is a state that you can enter into if you are willing to suspend your thinking. So I thought today that I would open up the floor to discuss 2 things. One is to hear expressions about your practice, but the other is to open up the floor to yesterday, what happened yesterday. Buddha, did I cut it on? When we talk about truth, it's not just a matter of what we think is like the dharmic truth or the absolute truth. It is also an explanation of it that's in accord with the propensities and the capacities of the hearer. And if it's not, then the Buddha says that's not. Like, we think the absolute truth is we get to this point and this is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and it stands alone. But it doesn't stand alone, because the truth has to come into contact with a hearer, and it has to meet the capacity of the hearer for it to be absolute. Has to impinge on the mind stream of the hearer. So if we talk some old-timey, esoteric, obscure dharma and nobody understands it, then you can't say that that was the highest level of truth. It's only when the hearer, it meets the capacity of the hearer. So when one is speaking, the prowess of a Buddha is that he can speak to 10 people who have different capacities, 10 different capacities, and they each hear it on the level of their understanding, and then it becomes something that is useful, that brings about attainment in the hearer. So I can remember in times past when there was a current event that we had all kinds of thoughts about the current event and what was happening. It was based on our whatever state we are in. And so I want to open up. This is not a test. Yeah, no, it's not a test. But I just want to hear how we place ourselves in the current moment. Concerning yesterday and the attempt on, oh, I'm sorry, too loud, too soft. In the room. Okay, how about I move my speaker? Okay, is that better? Better? Okay, so does anybody want to express anything about how they're feeling today? Yes.
I assume you're talking about what was in the news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there were many thoughts. But the one was that Mr. Trump had lots of good merit that kept him alive. And that we never can judge another person by our standards, because we don't even have the standards to judge. And also that this is, it just is, it's where we are in humanity. We've been there before for thousands and thousands of years. At some level, everything is in divine order. Everything is happening according to causes and conditions. And to just be at peace with it. There was more, but that's enough.
I watched myself. We were doing something else, and I got a text from a friend who had this vague thing about, do you think it was fake? And I was like, what? And so we paused and went online and learned in the present time what was going on. And, you know, at this age, we've been through other assassination attempts, and successful and not. And I kind of just watched how I responded differently at this age and this experience than in past. And I was very sad, but not dysregulated. I saw the shooter must have been really suffering, and as well. And then I heard that an attendee took the bullet and was killed, and other people wounded. I still don't have facts on that, and it just opened up my heart to how difficult our country situation is, and how ununited we are, and how much anger there is. And I don't have the solution to that except just to open up and try and pray for people. It's just very, very sad that as humans we are at this point. And I thought immediately of the dharma ending stage. It was like, is that part of why this is happening, and why we can't see each other as the same instead of as in opposition. So I know it's all going to work out somehow, and I just found it very, very sad. And I'm glad he wasn't killed. I'm not voting for him, but it would have been really bad.
Thank you. I just like to say that it's Sunday, and Sunday I read the Sunday Times all the time. This Sunday there was absolutely nothing in there on the front page about Trump. Like zero, nothing. And so I thought, how could that be? You know? And then I started thinking, well, politically, they hate Trump anyway, so I can understand that. But I think also, why is Trump any different than all the other murders and killings that we have in this country? Children, adults, people, I mean, just killing each other for absolutely no reason. Or, I mean, what reason can you possibly have to like take someone's life? So I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of like numb about all this because, yes, I mean, to me, Trump is like a cockroach. In other words, I say that about you too. He outlives everything. No matter what happens to him, he sneaks his way out of it, and he just moves on. And we see that in everything that he does. So, I don't know. I just think the country is in such a terrible place. It's just amazing how much hate there is in this world. And here we are, full of love, but we're kind of like outnumbered by all this hatred. So, I really don't know how you change that. And I guess, like, you know, like Pannavati would say, Padideepa would say, one person at a time, everybody, you know, the more people that believe in peace and happiness, and whether it's Buddhism or whatever you believe in, is the only way that we're going to change. So one person at a time. I don't know.
I want to get back to that cockroach thingy that you, because I thought I heard you say, like, sort of like you. And did you say that?
Yeah, because you go through so many things, and you always come up on top of it.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you clarified.
Oh, it's like a positive.
Positive.
Right,
Believe
yeah.
me, it's positive.
Oh.
Yeah.
You can survive anything. Radiation, microwaves.
Yeah, that's true. I had a microwave that was broken for 2 years. The glass cracked. So I just took the glass out of it and continued to use it for 2 years. And then my boyfriend came over one day, and he noticed that it was that there was no glass in it, you know. And I said, well, it hasn't bothered me, you know. Yes.
And she glows in the dark.
So I guess I just wanted to, you know, and I guess for me it's just personalizing what I was doing throughout my day yesterday, and having these moments where I was getting really attached to my thoughts and what was going on, and underneath all that was just like this anger and rage that I've really struggled with all my life, of like, how do I get this out, like how do I release myself from these really strong feelings, because I get so consumed in my own thoughts and my own feelings that the world just kind of shuts off, and I stay there, and everywhere that I go, and I try to get away from it. And then when I heard what happened, it kind of put things into perspective of like how deep some of these feelings go, not only with myself, but how it feeds all into itself. And even with my friend, like some of my friends that I love them, like I was upset because I felt I wasn't invited to a certain thing, and they were all somewhere having a great time, but I wasn't there. And then one of them called me, and they're like, I've been helping someone for 3 hours. Like, but how quickly my mind will go to certain places and stay there. But also when I am able to be, you know, like when I'm able, I began to read and listen to some of the dharma talks, and that kind of put things into perspective. And then like the way that I think about it today, right now, is like how quickly I become blinded, but how when I become aware of the ridiculousness of my head, how like the dharma kind of comes in and just releases me, and I get some clarity. And I can just kind of stay there for a little while. It's hard for me to stay there. It's really a challenge sometimes, but all of this, it's, you know, it helps me understand that there are these things that kind of rise up, and they're part of my human experience. I can't deny them. I know that they are facts that I know, but I am also aware that I can be free from them if I just allow myself to be aware for that split second, if that makes sense. And like that is beyond my control, all that stuff. What I can do is continue to just practice and be loving. Sometimes I can be a bit of a grump with my loving, but I think it's the attempting of trying and moving towards that. Anyway, yeah.
Hi, I've only been here a couple of times, so I'm not so sure that I feel 100% comfortable saying something, but I hope it's all right.
It absolutely is.
So yesterday I picked up my mother's remains at the funeral home, and I was driving back here from Asheville, and then I had a 6-hour marathon conversation with my oldest niece around all kinds of difficult family dynamics. And then during the call, she's like, I just got a text that there was an assassination on Trump. I'm like, is that real? So I've not heard anyone mention what I'm feeling is a lot of fear right now. A lot of fear for what is happening, what has been happening, and what will happen. You know, my mind goes to all kinds of thoughts like, well, was that a martyr trying to do something to help former president become a president again? I mean, all kinds of thoughts that I just don't even need to go to. So I think that my biggest piece of work is to try to detach from a lot of fear, because I can't do anything in that mindset that's very helpful. But this is very challenging for me. I'm someone that would be in many populations of thought, someone that's other, and that could be done too. So that really frightens me.
Thank you. You know, I generally don't deal with current events, you know, but I felt today that we really should so that we can really know where we are in our, when I say our worldview, I'm talking about in our dharmic life. It's really easy for us to have platitudes and to be able to know the right things that we should say, you know, but part of penetrating to the truth is really knowing where one's own mind is. And I'd like to continue with this if anyone, before I make some comments, I'd like to continue if anyone has anything they would like to.
In my case, I wasn't watching the news, but my housemate came home and she told me about it, and my first response was very neutral, and I had to look at that. Was that just, you know, on the scale of aversion, attachment, neutral, or was that a more dharmic? I didn't really know what that response was. And, you know, was I just resisting how much I don't like Trump and just settling on neutral, or what was I doing, you know? And I noticed two things in the news that I found interesting. One was, we don't know much about the young man yet, except that he is young. He's 20 years old. Also that he was registered as a Republican. So I thought maybe that was informative. You know, it wasn't strictly along partisan lines. We don't know anything about, you know, about him and what was in his mind, but and the other bit that I picked up on was someone reflecting on the history in Italy, and Italy went through decades of really extreme partisan violence, you know, to the point of violence in their society. It didn't go on to discuss, you know, how that changed, but it did change. So I thought that was interesting in terms of, as someone mentioned, the causes and conditions, and these are the conditions, and then Italy went through that, and then they came out of it. I try to resist going, oh yeah, those Italians are so passionate, or, you know, resist any of that kind of thinking, and just, I'm kind of just letting stuff flow through, I guess, but you know, and then I was very young, like most of us were, but when Kennedy was killed, we noticed the country came through that, and I was like, well, you know, so there's that too, of touching into previous experience. So I didn't like, one thing was, it's getting a lot of airplay, two things. One, the image of Trump with his fist in the air, and, you know, that's people saying what a powerful image it was. And then the quote that someone said, well, now he's a martyr, he's won the election, and that's getting a lot of repetition too. So it's hard listening to all of this and not getting caught up in it. So.
My Soma had told me, actually. Soma's really good at being updated on political events and news. So a lot of the things I receive are from Soma. So that's helpful. But my first response is I was actually sad, or there was kind of, you know, somewhat shock. So I watched the video, watched it a couple of times. And just observing it, and I started to see the crowd and just get a feeling for American minds and really, you know, who we are and what our minds are and the activities we do together. And a part of me was sad that it was I was really worried if somebody else got shot, if somebody else had died. And then once the newscasters started speaking, I just really started to not care. A lot of them, I can't listen to them. I don't know, when they're asking questions, they're chasing a story, and I don't want to listen. I don't want to follow along your trail that you're trying to snuff out what's right, what's wrong, and all those kinds of things. So part of me, didn't care about that. But I was just really started to reflect on the minds of Americans. And we are wanting our freedom, but we're actually doing the opposite. We are we're signing up for the things for our freedom to be taken away, and we're acting in that way. And so we don't know what we're doing, and that's really what sat with me. So.
Going back to our time yesterday morning, one of the things we landed on together, the three of us, was not asking the question why, but asking the question how. How? And we could go down all sorts of rabbit holes with why, and get spun around and get caught up with why, and never really find an answer, or a true answer, or a resolved answer. But how? And as we speak with the Buddhic mind about ourselves first, and then others, how am I with this? How do I connect with this, or do I? So again, I did get an alert, and my first reaction was, how? After our morning conversation, it was right there. How is it that we can keep allowing ourselves, not them, but ourselves, to be cascading down this situation, and not just this assassination attempt, and the fact that someone is killed, the fact that 2 people are wounded, seriously wounded, but how is it that where do I stand, and how is it for me? My first reaction was, oh my God. And then the second one was, this doesn't surprise me, which made me very sad, because there's so much muck and junk out there. And it's true, I would check to see only for updates on the well-being of both Trump and the people that were injured. But other than that, I didn't want to hear, how did you feel when the shots rang out? That's a how, but it's not helpful. I think it came in so strong. Look at where your mind is. I mean, I have fear. In my work of 40-some years, fear drives so many things. Now what's going to happen? And instead of going down that, it's Lord, pray for them. Step out and not get engaged with what is bringing us down. The separation and the destruction that goes with separation. And I think truly, from where I stand, it's the fear that has gotten us here. Played on fear, reproduced fear, And at some point, I got to trust that it will shift. It will shift.
I just want to ask a question for you. So how do you change that? I mean, how do we each change that? So we're not so violent or so fearful or so, how do we each change that? In what direction? I mean, I have a good understanding of what you do, but realistically, me, myself, how do I change that?
I saw a little, I wouldn't call it a cartoon, but on Facebook, because I do check that. And there was a way to work with our thoughts and prayers, because whenever anything like this happens, it's our thoughts and prayers. And then the very next caption was people at the voting machines. That's just kind of one thought that came up. But I think the question is for you and you and you and you. How do I change that? How do I start with my own mindset, my own belief, my own understanding, to not bury my head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, and to look at where I'm at, where's my fear level, and what does that drive in me? And then look outside once you've established that sense of where I'm at, and to love and support each other. And that sounds, broad and big, but I think that's truly it, is that, probably several years ago I went, oh, too bad he missed. I don't think I would have said that. But, that was the anger and the frustration that reality is that there was some of that. And I've learned over time that just like me, I may not be as boisterous as some people are, but I do have that thought that sits there that I've tampered down over the years, just like me.
I was listening and was surprised that I didn't go to fear, because for most of my life, fear was my higher power. And I was so comforted that that wasn't the first thing about what next. And it's because of this dharma that I felt like that, because what came to mind first was that why do we think that the goodness isn't as powerful as the bad? And I went to that and I went, if I had the ability to ask, all I can do is ask the Buddhas and try to get to a state where I could change circumstances and I could somehow help people, unite by the way I behave, and that this would resolve in a good way. And I know that whenever I've gone down the fear rabbit hole, I lose complete vision of the vastness of what's possible to be good. And I think it gives it power. And so I'm really, really glad that was not my first response to this. And I'm grateful for this, Dharma.
I found it interesting. I have to rely on other people's processing or experience very often. And I sort of go back to 1968. But I wasn't born then. And so you're sort of recycling things that happened. But they had it in mind that it's a good idea to kill some prominent people. And I had a history teacher who was really involved in civil rights, and tears would still come to his eyes when he remembered Martin Luther King speaking. And then you have people who mentioned Kennedy and this inspiration. This was before my time, But what came to me, there's a processing part, was I was 5 or 6, and a man named Ronald Reagan got shot. And sort of people are sort of indifferent to it. And, you know, you're 5 or 6, you feel these things and you have a sense. And I had another person who was in my class says, what do you mean? Why isn't your heart and all these feelings being touched by Ronald Reagan getting shot? And I'm 5 or 6, and that was a good question. And I really didn't know why I should feel something about something. And then in that same milieu, what touched me a little more was they were deciding to harm the Pope at the time. And for some reason, the Pope and someone harming him affected me more than Ronald Reagan. I'm only, you know, you're 5 or 6 or 7. And, but even, I was like, he's a man of God. Wouldn't he know some harm or something is going to occur that's maybe not in his best interest of living? So, and these are a young age, and then I thought we were done. Killing people is a good idea, and you know, the Trump happened, and again, another person came to mind to me was Thomas Merton, and the story with him was he got electrocuted in Southeast Asia. And then, again, my abstract mind went to a CIA person who said, we killed him. It wasn't an accident. And this normal person killed a precious, enlightened being. And that's sort of the threads on the continuum of how to process things, and it's hard because it's part of my development. You don't have all the tools when you're 5, 6, 7, and then when you develop the tools, you know, it gets in this muddied water, and yes, and you're still seduced by the stories, and then I had to turn off. There wasn't any more positive information watching more images of Trump and how it was being covered, and I was just able to put it on the shelf. So that's a lot of processing, but I knew intuitively that watching images on the screen wasn't going to produce deeper understanding. So that's just a convoluted way, and I appreciate people's attention, but I thought we were done killing, you know, sort of anarchist or destructive minds making statements in the political domain, but it seems like we're revisiting that again.
So I was out, and then I walked into my neighbor's condo, and she said, Trump just got shot. And I thought, that doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me if Biden were shot, or Trump was shot, or anybody being shot anymore. But what did surprise me when one of the women that was being interviewed said he was looking in one direction at one chart, and then he turned around to the other direction, and if he had not turned around to the other direction, he would have been shot in the head and was only grazed. That, to me, was like, whoa. That was just so unusual. Not unusual that he would be shot, but unusual that he would make that movement and his ear was grazed instead of being shot in the head. And then, surprising to me, I didn't have a whole lot going on about that. I noticed that I started this whole movement into, oh, now it's going to happen. You know, like it's already so out of control. What's going to happen next with the whole out of control piece of it? And then personally, it brought me back to this fundamental thought that thanks to the teachings, always brings me back to our innate self-cherishing. And if we can just focus on dissolving that self-cherishing, because that's where all of the anger, all of the fear, all of the everything comes from. So that's what came to my mind. It all starts with innate self-cherishing, which comes through the ages.
Thank you.
Did anyone else want to speak? Because I've already spoken. I wanted to say one more thing about this neutrality we've been kind of exploring, sort of a dharmic response, but the other aspect to it is accepting the mirror of our culture so that I don't really feel that it's not me, you know, separating myself from it. I feel more receiving of, you know, this is what's happening, and this is, you know, it's not just samsaric mind, oh yeah, there's the samsaric mind. Really receiving the mirror of our culture, not to analyze it or investigate it so much as just that receiving and not separating myself from it. And I think that's really helpful to the mental and emotional health, so that I'm not, oh, they're so bad and wrong or crazy or ignorant, or, you know, of just that receptivity to the mirror and of what's happening. So.
All hearts and minds clear. Okay, great. So I would like to share as well, because when I was sitting at the kitchen table when the news flashed by, and Kay mentioned it to me because I was only half watching the news, and so she reiterated. She said Trump got shot. Yeah, and we had just had a conversation a couple of weeks earlier, Kay and I, on, you know, I said, I really don't understand how nobody, that hasn't been an assassination attempt on either one of them. I said, you know, I'm watching and I feel like they're unduly exposed, and there's all of this rhetoric going around. I mean, that was one man, I'm one woman, you know. That it only takes one of us. And I was immediately chagrined because I thought so many times, like, I was thinking about the attack on the Capitol and things that happened, and the conversation that has arisen since then, and now the overturning of cases like boys will be boys, and how it sets up a condition, and it only takes one of us to meet that condition that's being set up to change everything for everybody. That's how powerful we are. That's how important it is for us to tame our minds. And so I had to admit that I was a participant. There was an interconnectedness with me and that young man and this event. Now, it's for clear seeing. It's not for guilt, it's for clear seeing. How important it is for us to really govern our thoughts, and how wonderful it is for us that we have teachers who have appeared in the history of mankind to point us to how powerful the mind is. That mind is chief, and whatever we think and ponder on becomes the inclination. And that while we might not follow through on something, you know, triggering and putting out into the into the universe, this mind thought, it is picked up by other minds. And we like poo-poo it. I don't give it that much thought. But I can remember saying that 1/2 an inch, you know, too bad it wasn't 1/2 an inch over. And ha, 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 you know, not recognizing that I really am putting out into the world a certain signal to be broadcast that will be heard by someone who gets influenced because of the delusion of their own mind. You know, we can't say, he did that, is what I'm saying. You know, we have to see our interconnectedness. And when we truly see our interconnectedness, then there's some shifts that can occur in the world, you know, because then we will be using our powers. We will be using our goodness seeds. We will be using, you know, and I was glad to have that particular realization, because before it was a reality, I had lots of thoughts or lots of things I said in jest and seriously, you know. But when this event occurred, I could see, in some way, I could see my part in it. So then my mind that tries to fix everything went to the fact of, I forget his name, he was the guy who stood in Alabama in front of the school doors when George Wallace, and I remember the George Wallace incident. And he was saying, you know, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and almost took the whole country to war, you know, with his stance and his position. And then he got shot. And I'm going to tell you, I fell in love with him at the end of his life, because his whole mind changed after he got shot. He really became a good man. And I said, now I wonder if this will affect Trump in the same way. So at the first time I heard the recording, before, you know, we were hearing it sort of, not real time, but close to real time. And I could hear something really good, fight, 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 right? But after that, they turned the volume down. And it says, looks like he's mouthing fight, fight, fight.
I thought you said something else.
No, I thought it was like fight, fight, fight. And that was a rallying cry. But that was, yeah. But we never know what thing can turn a person, especially if they think they're invincible, unstoppable, untouchable. So my prayer is that he can take a moment and use this for reflection, because he has another chance. Now, he may not take it, but he's not alone. It's all the minds that are joined with him create his illusion of power. And so we have to think of what alignment, what joining of mind we want to have. And that determines, to a great extent, how things go. What he means by mind is chief is that we look at outer actions, but all outer actions are produced from the mind. And he's telling us, when I say he, I mean the sage is telling us that when we align in a certain way where we have thought we were powerless, we become an instrument for good. But it depends upon our recognition of the interconnectedness of everything. Some people in the world understand this principle really well, and they use it to accomplish their own goals, use it for what they want to use it for. So I said bad people are better, have more confidence in badness than good people do in goodness. Because we have fear, we have, we're always looking out there and seeing something. But they have it in here, fight, fight, fight. So what kind of fight do we have in here? What kind of arousal do we have within ourselves, that we have the qualities and the capacities to change conditions for good? Do I think I have it? And yes, I think I do. But it starts with me. I wrote an article, I forget which magazine, I forget. But they wanted to know an article on how do I contribute to war, And everybody wrote, there were several of us that were asked to write articles. It was a whole magazine issue on war and so forth. And not one of the teachers but me said that I directly contribute to war by each bit of venom that I put out into the world. Whether it's arguing with my sister or my brother, whether it's thinking something negative about them but just not saying it, whether it's saying something negative about them to someone else to incite them and bring up a breach between two people, all of these ways, trickling it on back. I said, I contribute to war every day, almost in every moment, by something that I say, right here in my own house, right here, in my own sangha, right here, I'm contributing because I am bringing that energy into the world. I am personifying it. I am releasing it to the world, and then when it happens, I say, oh, look what they did, and not seeing my part in it at all. So the Buddhas all say that we have to become aware of our total interconnectedness. It's not just one thing that happens that produces something, but there's like 10,000 other tributaries and ancillary actions that help produce that moment. And so I looked at myself and some of the comments that I've made in the past, and I repent of that. Even saying it in just, J-E-S-T, but I wasn't J-O-K-I-N-G, and how we have to have more respect for our words. Yes.
I felt that was true when you were relaying that article, but my mind was a little curious. Did that truth land on that audience?
Well, I don't
Or
know.
how did it land?
Well, I don't know, because it was.
But it was true.
It was Shambhala, or it was tricycle, or it was dharma wheel, or it was something. I don't know if it landed or not, but that was my truth.
Yeah.
And it, because I was really pondering the question, not from a surface level. I was really trying to go deep, and we have these notions of our interdependentness and all of that, but it just becomes some conversation, part of our jargon, part of our blah blah. But because we're working this past 2 years on actual cultivation, this is where the rubber really meets the road. It's where the rubber meets the road, and how we can come to know our true capacity as practitioners. I mean, when nothing's going on, you don't need anything. But when something is going on, then there is a space for usefulness. But you can't just say it. It has to be real in you to activate it. So I can tell us, quote, spiritual people have been saying a lot of stuff for a long time, but we haven't activated the power of our sayings, in an authentic way, because if we did, it would be showing in the world. If not, if we don't expect to see it in our realities, we need to just give it up. But why should we toil over and effort over and turn and give our energies to, if we don't believe that it's true and that it's effective? So I don't blame, when I see something go on in the world, I don't blame the baddie. I'm looking at what quality of our supposed goodness is really authentic. What part? And I honestly feel that we're on the rise. I feel that we're on the rise. I felt that when he, just a half an inch, maybe not even a half an inch from he was looking this way, and he turned this way, and it clipped that close. And I said, I didn't even think that those that I oppose their ideology, I didn't think that the baddies won. I thought that the goodies won. That for that moment, that righteousness prevailed. And we say, well, like, what could have happened? I mean, we can speculate, but we don't know. That might have been the defining moment that thrust us and accelerated a civil war. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know, because the next moment doesn't depend on the last moment. The next moment depends on this moment. That gap when the last thought is ended before the next thought arises. Right there is the space where difference can be made. And so, counting on those who seek after goodness and who have good intention, that right there, pausing and just allowing whatever happened in the past to fall away, and all of our attention go right here to the gap between the next moment. If we knew what to do with this gap, if we knew the influence that we could have in the world in this moment going forward, I can tell you, I bet you churches are full today. And most of them in the churches don't know about the gap. But we do. Here's the place, the space where we create the future. What kind of future do you want to have? I mean, the gap is pregnant with innumerable futures. Which one will you seed going in that will produce the next moment? Yes.
While you were talking, all I could think about was the song. Oh, thank you. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. So I kept on, We Are the World, where everybody gets together and sings this song. Do you know that song?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's such an important thing, and we are the world. So it just depends upon how we want to deal with this world.
Yeah.
And for me, as in a movie, I would want to stand up right now and just be as good as I could possibly be. Except that when I get out in here, but when I get out, I'm back in the world again. So, I mean, it's like just keeping that within your heart, knowing that to do whatever the right is, to do right is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you're on the other side. And so you wanna keep it right. You wanna make it the best and the happiest. And I don't know, Padideepa, he always comes into my mind. And so you don't always have to be happy, right? I mean, those are things that he's always said. But you have to understand that maybe sometimes you won't be happy, but you're doing really good things. So happiness isn't the answer for everything, but it helps you to get through whatever you have to get through, if you do it in the right way.
That's the cockroach phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Brian.
Just a couple. So, just to remember, there's two dead. One shooter who has his own story, which is filled with some type of sadness. I don't know where it's from. The other gentleman, who I don't know anything about, and 3 wounded, including Trump. For the longest time, I've always thought about the serenity prayer with Trump. And that, what I can recognize is he has a history that has led him to where he is, and it's a sad, difficult history. And I have compassion and empathy for Trump. When I say that with some of my friends, they said, I'd rather not have empathy or compassion for Trump. And that's part of where our problem is, that it's easy to see that man suffers, and to have empathy and compassion for him and send that out in the world instead of, I wish he didn't this. That's the way I can maybe have an influence, is to share. And when I do serenity prayer at night, often it's Trump, and what I can do is try to have courage to serenity to accept the things I cannot change, Trump's actions, courage to change the things I can, my understanding of why he has those actions, and make sure I understand the difference. And so that's the thing that I try to do, is get to some sense of empathy and compassion for people who I have disagreement with.
Mm-hmm. For people who I have disagreement with. And so that's not just Trump, So I'm looking at whoever agrees with him about anything. And now I've just blanketed the whole group, And I listened to each person that spoke yesterday, who was there in the crowd. And they spoke like not like what I consider crazy and deranged people and evil, wicked people that just want to hurt people, but they spoke like just ordinary people. And I understood that when everybody is suffering under the blanket of samsaric forces, everybody, and they know no way out except what we were doing in our meeting, and just running in circles, analyzing, and and trying to come up with solutions. That's it. That's this samsaric world, and that's the mind stream that pervades this world. So who do you look to? Do the strong bear the infirmities of the weak, or are the weak supposed to carry the strong? And which category do you put yourself in? And so I know that I have a responsibility to carry, to hold up, to fortify, to bear the infirmities of the weak. And it's changing. What's happening right now can change us for the worse if we see ourselves as weak, or it can change us for the better, because we influence each other. That's it. We influence each other. And if we pay attention to that, and if we're truly willing to walk, this is some of the we say sacrifice that we make, and sacrifice seems like drudgery, if you understand it from a worldly perspective. But if you see it from a divine perspective, the sacrifices, it is my pleasure to help you carry your burden. It's my pleasure to carry it for you, to lift you up. And I'm speaking in a real world now, not in spiritual language world, but in a real world, in a real sense. And that's how people who've gotten the wrong idea, or who got taken the hold to the wrong message, that's how they can shift and change. In the Christian world, we might say what was used for evil can become something that can be a measure for good. But in our world, we would say that the mind can, that mind that can shift the nature of appearances in the world. And we've been talking about it, right? We've been talking about that this whole year, that right now we react to what we see out here in the world. But he said, through continuing to develop our practice and our cultivation, there will come the time when we are proficient that we will be able to change the outer circumstances on the world based on our own minds. Do you believe that? That's what this practice is for. That's actually what the Bodhisattva path is. It's having the awakened mind that can transform appearances. Not transform opinions, but can transform appearances. That means shifting the outer world. That's the real saving. It's not I saved them because I bought them some gas, or because, I let them stay at my house for 2 nights because they're homeless, or because, but it's that, having the capacity to shift outer, to change the structure of appearances. And it's funny that you mentioned your cockroach, because I was studying this morning, and I was reading a section in a Mahayana Sutra, and it was telling the story of a practitioner that was sent off by their teacher to study somewhere, and in some remote area, and that practitioner was attacked or inundated by all kinds of bugs. And she was constantly fighting all these bugs. And she went back to the teacher and said, I can't stay there because there are all these bugs. Seriously, I'm reading this morning, right? Because there are all these bugs, and she said to her, mind is chief, and she said the appearance of the bugs is because of your own greed and hatred manifesting in this way. And so she said, overcome your greed and hatred, and send her back. And she went back to that space, again inundated by all of the bugs, but she took the bugs as her greed and her hatred. And in taking them on in that way, and going into a higher state of mind that she didn't see them as any different from herself, the bugs disappeared. Yeah. So sometimes I think these stories are literal. Sometimes I think they're not literal. And sometimes I think they're both literal and not literal. Or sometimes I think they're neither literal nor not literal. And that's when shift can begin to change in your lives. I can tell from this conversation versus a conversation that we had last year or 2 years ago that there's a shift. Maybe it's not all the way, but there's a shift. So you should recognize when there's a shift. Then you know how to support the shift, right? And so we know that all things come into being through cause and condition. You could say cause is the ignorance of our thoughts, speech, and action. So this arose due to causes and conditions, right? The condition is the effect of our erroneous thinking. But when something appears, we cannot deny the causality. So the question about how that we were asked, how did this come about? Not why is this happening? Not what will happen, not who will do what, but how. And if we could see cause and condition, we know that there is nothing happening in the moment that we have not, in our interdependentness, created the cause for its arising. So in that sense, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, I am the victim and I am the perpetrator. And if we can penetrate into the meaning of this, we will be able to have an impact in this world that's more powerful. We're learning now, But when it drops into us in a real way, not just good dharma stuff to say, but when it actually drops in us in a real way, then we will see the power of things. If a man takes your coat, the Bible said, give him your cloak too. He said, if he slaps you on one cheek, offer the other one up. Right now, I'm in I may or I may not. Just depends on where my mind is at the moment. I'm going to just tell you the truth about me. Just where my mind is at the moment. But I'm moving towards that place that I can, And if I get to the place that I can accept the slap on the other cheek, there's some place to go beyond that. Because that's where we come to know what our true capacity and power is. And then it'll be like the dog coming from last week's lesson, coming to attack the virtuous one. The dog leaped. He hit an invisible field. He couldn't even touch him. Do I think I can still be touched right now? I do. But the day will come that I will no longer be touchable. And it's through my own effort, through my own practice, through my own deliberate liberation of my own mind that I get into this space. So pay more attention to what your own thoughts are, whether they're good thoughts or whether they're not good, whether they're not useful, whether they're not beneficial. Pay attention to your own. What am I projecting out into the world in this moment? The minute I heard his son make a comment, I said, it's starting already. His first comment was, well, this is because of all the crazy, Democrats out there. And so do you really think that, it's like we've been doing all these things? He says, well, who's in the hospital, Republican or Democrat? But all of the things that happened to Pelosi's family and the people that were killed and the noose for the what's his name? For Pence and all of that was nothing, but the minute this happened, there was the vitriol going. It's because of the crazy Democrats. And I felt my temperature begin to rise. And as soon as I felt, now I just had the thought, the correct thought, right? But that watered an old seed, and that seed began to rise. And I had to say, down, boy, sit. I had to say, sit. And it's in the moment that we have to be able to say it. Not later when we're thinking about it. We already let him out the gate. He's gone. He's over the hill biting somebody. It's in the moment, the minute it's arising, refusing to give in to that frame of mind. And you're going to be called upon to show your prowess in the coming days and the coming weeks. Because this is a destabilizing moment. It lets somebody's know that nobody is untouchable. And that's going to be scary to some people. But we don't have to be scared. Know that we're going to go through things, but we can learn to be in this world, but not of it. We can, if we want to get out of it. If we want to stay rolling around in it, swim like the fish in a school. But if we want to get out of it, go against the stream. And that's my encouragement to you this week. So everybody's going to come back in next week having a peaceful, stable, and happy mind. No matter what has been said, we can counter it with a higher mind, a higher thought. Not a defense. We don't have to defend, but we can put out into and change the atmosphere by bringing the energy, the mind stream of the holy beings down to earth. If we don't do that, what else? There's nothing else for us to do. But that's the connection we have, and we can bring it down. And I'm looking to see and to hear about it in the coming week. That's all I want to say today. I thank you all for being able to keep your peace, or if you don't exactly have it, to know that it is available to be taken up and activated, and that you do understand. Think of this life like a dream, like a bubble, like a shadow. You see a shadow, and it's truly there. We're truly in this world. It's like it's real. I'm sitting right here talking to y'all right there. It's real. But when we say that it's a false appearance, it doesn't mean that. It means that we don't hold it, haven't grasped it as it actually is. You can see a shadow, but can you grasp it? No. Can you pick it up? Not possible. And yet, there it is. And it's right in that gap that our freedom can be found. Yeah? Anybody want to say anything else before I close today? So I know this was a little bit usual. We just get right on with the dharma. But today could be a very different day. That's why I want to say don't take it so lightly because he escaped by half an inch. Don't take it so so lightly. Who else may be emboldened thinking, oh, my aim,
As long as it doesn't move.
right,
As long as it doesn't move.
yeah, you know, it could be a different day in America. So I'm rejoicing that it's this day instead of what it could have been. Yeah, we need more time.